Have you ever stopped to observe that person in your social circle who simply does not exist online? It is not that they deleted social media in a fit of rage or made a dramatic farewell post. They simply never posted anything. Never. Zero photos, zero opinions, zero stories. While the rest of the world documents every meal, every thought, every moment, this person remains completely invisible in the digital world. And here is the disturbing truth that nobody tells you. These people are not shy, antisocial, or outdated. Science reveals something much deeper, and frankly a bit unsettling, about how their minds work. Psychologists have discovered that people who never post on social media possess neurological patterns, personality traits, and defense mechanisms completely different from the rest of the population. What is really happening inside the heads of these people? Why can they resist the impulse that dominates billions of humans? And the most important question, do they know something we do not know? There is a terror that lives quietly in the human heart, one that most people will never speak about out loud. It is not the fear of death, failure, or even loneliness. It is the fear of being truly seen and then judged as insufficient. This fear operates like an invisible hand on the shoulder, whispering warnings every time someone reaches for their phone to share something about their lives. For those who never post on social media, this fear has taken a particular shape. It has become a guardian that protects them from a specific kind of vulnerability. When you post something online, you are essentially saying to the world, "Here I am. This is what I think matters. This is who I believe I am." And then you wait. You wait for the likes, the comments, the validation that confirms you were right to share, that you matter, that you exist in a way that other people recognize and approve of. But what happens when that validation does not come? What happens when you share a piece of yourself and the response is silence, or worse, criticism? For some people, that possibility is not just uncomfortable but genuinely threatening to their sense of self. Psychologists call this rejection sensitivity, and research shows it exists on a spectrum. Those with high rejection sensitivity experience potential social rejection as a form of danger, triggering the same neural pathways that respond to physical threats. The people who never post have often experienced this sensitivity in acute ways. Perhaps they shared something once, and the response was underwhelming or painful. Perhaps they watched others get criticized or mocked online and internalized that danger. Or perhaps they simply possess a heightened awareness of how cruel and judgmental the digital audience can be. They have calculated the risk and decided it is not worth taking. This calculation is not weakness. In fact, it reveals a sophisticated understanding of social dynamics that many frequent posters lack. They recognize that every post is a performance, and every performance carries the risk of failure. They understand that the court of public opinion is fickle, irrational, and often merciless. They have seen people torn apart for innocent statements, watched careers destroyed over misunderstood jokes, observed friendships shattered because of political disagreements aired publicly. The fear that keeps them from posting is actually a form of emotional intelligence. They are reading the room in a way that others are not. While everyone else is rushing to share their thoughts and experiences, these individuals are considering the downstream consequences. They are thinking 3 steps ahead, imagining how their words might be interpreted, misinterpreted, screenshotted, and used against them months or years later. But there is another layer to this fear that goes even deeper. It is not just about avoiding criticism from others. It is about avoiding disappointment in themselves. When you post something and it receives minimal engagement, you are forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. Maybe you are not as interesting, funny, or important as you thought. Maybe your life is not as enviable as you hoped. Maybe your opinions do not matter as much as you believed. This confrontation with ordinariness is something many people cannot handle. So they either post compulsively, constantly seeking validation to avoid facing this truth, or they refuse to post at all, preserving the possibility that they could be special if they chose to be. The non-posters have often chosen the second option. By remaining silent, they protect themselves from the definitive answer that their contributions might not be valued. There is also a fear of permanence that haunts these individuals. Every post is a digital tattoo, a record that exists beyond your control. You cannot truly delete anything once it enters the internet. Even if you remove a post, someone might have saved it, screenshotted it, or archived it. The people who never post understand this in their bones. They recognize that their digital silence is the only thing they can control completely. Once you post something, you have surrendered control over how it will be used, interpreted, or preserved. This fear might sound paranoid to frequent posters, but is it really? In a world where people have lost jobs over decade-old tweets, where college admissions officers scroll through applicant social media, where relationships have ended because of Instagram activity. The non-posters might actually be the realists. They have chosen to opt out of a system that demands constant self-exposure, while offering no real protection or permanence. The most profound aspect of this fear is that it reveals a deeper truth about modern life. We have created a society where silence is interpreted as absence, where not participating is seen as suspicious or antisocial. The non-posters feel this pressure acutely. They are constantly explaining themselves, justifying their choice to remain invisible, defending their right to exist without documentation. And this pressure only reinforces their original fear, proving that they were right to be cautious about a world that demands performance as the price of acceptance. The silence of non-posters is often mistaken for simplicity, but this interpretation misses something crucial about how intelligence actually manifests in the digital age. While the rest of the world is busy broadcasting, these individuals are engaged in a different kind of cognitive activity altogether, one that requires a level of self-awareness and strategic thinking that most people never develop. Consider what happens in the brain when someone decides to post on social media. There is an immediate rush of dopamine at the moment of sharing, followed by an anxious monitoring period where the person checks repeatedly for responses. This cycle hijacks the reward system, creating a pattern of behavior that operates largely outside conscious control. The frequent poster is, in many ways, acting on autopilot, driven by neurochemical impulses rather than deliberate choice. The non-poster has somehow interrupted this cycle before it begins. They possess what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about their own thinking. They observe the impulse to share, and then they pause. In that pause lives a form of intelligence that is becoming increasingly rare. They ask themselves questions that most people skip right over. Why do I want to share this? What am I hoping to gain? What am I really communicating? Who am I performing for? This questioning reveals a mind that refuses to operate on default settings. While algorithms are designed to exploit human psychology, making sharing feel natural and necessary, these individuals have somehow maintained a critical distance. They see the machinery at work. They recognize that platforms are engineered to encourage constant participation, not because it benefits users, but because it generates data and advertising revenue. Research in behavioral economics shows that most human decisions are made through mental shortcuts and heuristics rather than careful analysis. We do what feels natural, what everyone else is doing, what requires the least cognitive effort. The non-poster has rejected these shortcuts in favor of a more demanding approach. Every time they resist the urge to post, they are exercising a form of executive function that strengthens with practice. They are building psychological muscles that others allow to atrophy. There is also a sophisticated understanding of attention economics at play. These individuals recognize that attention is a finite resource, perhaps the most valuable resource in the modern world. By refusing to compete for attention, they are making a calculated withdrawal from a market they see as rigged. They understand that the game is designed so that most players lose, with only a tiny percentage receiving disproportionate rewards, while the vast majority shout into the void. This withdrawal is not passive but strategic. Instead of fragmenting their attention across multiple platforms, constantly switching between creating content and consuming it, they consolidate their cognitive resources. They direct their mental energy toward pursuits that offer deeper satisfaction than fleeting online validation. They read longer texts, engage in extended conversations, pursue hobbies that require sustained focus. In an age of distraction, their attention span becomes a competitive advantage. The intelligence of non-posters also manifests in their understanding of identity formation. Psychologists have long known that identity is not fixed, but constantly constructed through social interaction. When you post online, you are outsourcing a significant portion of your identity construction to an audience that may not have your best interests at heart. You begin to curate yourself for maximum approval, smoothing away complexity and contradiction in favor of a coherent brand. Non-posters resist this outsourcing. They maintain control over their own self-concept, allowing it to remain complex, contradictory, and private. They understand that not everything needs to be shared to be real, that private experiences can actually be more meaningful than public ones. This understanding reflects a philosophical sophistication about the nature of authenticity that frequent posters often lack. There is also a temporal intelligence at work. Non-posters recognize that the present moment will eventually become the past, and that their future selves might judge their current selves harshly. They are thinking across time in a way that shows remarkable foresight. They are protecting their future selves from the embarrassment, regret, or consequences that might arise from today's impulsive sharing. Perhaps most importantly, these individuals have cracked a code that keeps billions of people trapped. They have realized that the absence of online presence does not equal the absence of a life worth living. While others compulsively document experiences to prove they happened, non-posters are secure enough to let their experiences exist without external validation. They trust their own memory, their own sense of significance, their own judgment about what matters. This self-trust is a form of emotional maturity that many people never achieve. The human brain was not designed for social media. It evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to handle face-to-face interactions within small groups, where social feedback was immediate, physical, and limited in scope. Then, in the span of barely 15 years, we introduced a technology that floods the brain with social information at a scale and speed it was never meant to process. The result is predictable: addiction. But not everyone becomes addicted. The people who never post on social media have somehow avoided falling into a trap that has ensnared billions. To understand why requires looking at how addiction actually works in the brain. Every addiction, whether to substances or behaviors, operates through the same basic mechanism. A stimulus triggers a dopamine release, creating a feeling of pleasure or relief, which motivates the person to repeat the behavior. Over time, the brain adjusts, requiring more of the stimulus to achieve the same effect. Social media platforms are explicitly designed to exploit this mechanism. Every like, comment, and share triggers a small dopamine hit. The variable reward schedule, where you never know exactly when validation will arrive, makes the behavior even more addictive. It is the same principle that makes slot machines so compelling. The brain becomes trained to seek these micro-rewards constantly, checking phones dozens or hundreds of times per day. Non-posters never entered this cycle. Some made a conscious decision early on to abstain, recognizing the danger before it took hold. Others simply lacked the initial susceptibility. Research in addiction science shows that not everyone is equally vulnerable to addictive behaviors. Genetic factors, early life experiences, and personality traits all influence addiction risk. Those who never post may possess neurological or psychological characteristics that provided natural immunity. One key factor appears to be baseline dopamine function. People with naturally higher levels of dopamine or more sensitive dopamine receptors may feel less need to seek external stimulation. They derive sufficient pleasure from everyday experiences without requiring the amplified feedback loop that social media provides. Their brains are already satisfied, so the promise of likes and comments holds less appeal. Another protective factor is a low need for social comparison. Psychologists have identified social comparison as a fundamental human tendency, the drive to evaluate ourselves by measuring against others. Social media supercharges this tendency, providing endless opportunities to compare your life, appearance, achievements, and experiences with carefully curated versions of everyone else. For some people, this comparison is irresistible. For non-posters, it holds little interest. They might possess what researchers call a secure attachment style, meaning they developed stable, healthy relationships early in life that gave them a solid sense of self-worth. This security makes them less dependent on external validation. They do not need constant reassurance from others because they have internalized a stable sense that they are acceptable and valued. The praise of strangers on the internet offers nothing they do not already possess internally. The absence of this addiction has profound implications for daily life. The average person checks their phone over 150 times per day, with a significant portion of those checks related to social media. Each interruption fragments attention, disrupts concentration, and creates a low-level anxiety about missing something important. Non-posters are free from this cycle. Their attention remains intact. They can read a book for hours without checking their phone. They can have a conversation without the compulsion to document it. They can experience boredom without immediately reaching for digital stimulation. This freedom reveals what we have lost without realizing it. The constant availability of social media has eliminated the space where deeper thinking happens. Boredom, once considered merely unpleasant, is actually a crucial state for creativity and reflection. The brain needs downtime to process experiences, consolidate memories, and make unexpected connections. By filling every empty moment with scrolling, we prevent this processing from occurring. Non-posters still have access to boredom. They experience those long stretches of time where nothing much is happening, and rather than panic or reach for distraction, they allow their minds to wander. This wandering is where ideas emerge, where problems get solved, where the self gets examined and understood. They have preserved a cognitive capacity that others have traded away for the illusion of constant connection. The addiction that others experience also creates a distorted sense of time. Hours disappear into scrolling, leaving people wondering where the day went. Non-posters maintain a more natural relationship with time. Their days feel longer, fuller, more substantial. They are present for their own lives in a way that frequent users often are not. Perhaps most significantly, they have avoided the withdrawal symptoms that make quitting social media so difficult for others. People who try to step away from platforms often experience anxiety, restlessness, and an overwhelming fear of missing out. They feel disconnected, isolated, as if they have been cut off from something essential. Non-posters never develop this dependency, so they never experience this withdrawal. Their baseline state is one that others can only achieve through difficult, sustained effort. Freedom is a word that gets thrown around carelessly, but real freedom is specific and tangible. It means being able to make choices without external pressure, to direct your attention where you decide it should go, to construct your identity based on your own values rather than audience expectations. By these measures, most social media users have surrendered freedoms they do not even realize they once possessed. The loss begins with autonomy over your own attention. Before smartphones and social networks, people had the freedom to simply be present wherever they were. A meal was just a meal. A sunset was just a sunset. An accomplishment was something you experienced internally before deciding whether and how to share it. Now, for most people, experiences are immediately filtered through the question, how will this look online? Is this worth posting? Will people engage with this? This constant consideration represents a fundamental loss of presence. You are never fully where you are because part of your consciousness is always performing for an imagined audience. Non-posters have retained the freedom to experience life directly, without this intermediary layer. They can enjoy a moment purely for itself, without calculating its social media value. They taste their food instead of photographing it. They watch the sunset instead of trying to capture it. They celebrate achievements internally before considering whether to announce them. There is also the freedom of authentic self-expression that gets compromised. When you post regularly on social media, you inevitably begin to curate yourself. You emphasize certain aspects of your personality while hiding others. You share successes but conceal failures. You project confidence while hiding doubt. Over time, this curated version can become a cage. You feel pressure to remain consistent with the identity you have constructed online, even when it no longer fits who you actually are. Non-posters are free from this performance. Their identity remains fluid, private, and complex. They can change their minds without having to explain or justify the change to an audience. They can be contradictory, messy, and uncertain, without those qualities being documented and judged. They possess the freedom to evolve, without leaving a permanent record of who they used to be. The freedom to make mistakes without permanent consequences is another casualty of constant posting. In previous generations, embarrassing moments, poor decisions, and immature opinions could fade into memory. Now they live forever in digital archives. One thoughtless post can follow you for decades, affecting job prospects, relationships, and reputation. Non-posters have preserved the freedom to be imperfect without those imperfections becoming permanent public record. Consider also the freedom from comparison that they maintain. Social media creates a distorted version of reality, where everyone appears more successful, attractive, and happy than they actually are. Constant exposure to these curated highlights triggers comparison and inadequacy in even the most confident people. Studies show that time spent on social platforms correlates directly with decreased life satisfaction and increased depression. Non-posters have opted out of this comparison trap entirely. They judge their lives by their own standards rather than by impossible benchmarks set by carefully edited posts. There is a financial freedom at play too. The attention economy is designed to convert your engagement into revenue for platforms and advertisers. Every minute you spend scrolling is making someone else money while costing you time, the one truly finite resource. Non-posters have refused this transaction. They have kept their attention for themselves, using it for purposes they choose rather than purposes that algorithms choose for them. The freedom to have unpopular opinions without immediate backlash is another liberty that non-posters retain. Public discourse has become increasingly polarized and intolerant of nuance. Expressing a complex view that does not fit neatly into established camps can result in attacks from multiple sides. Many people self-censor as a result, staying quiet on important topics to avoid conflict. Non-posters have preserved the freedom to think freely because they are not constantly monitoring their thoughts for potential public reaction. They also maintain freedom from the artificial urgency that social media creates. Platforms are designed to make everything feel immediate and important. Breaking news, trending topics, and viral moments create a sense that you must pay attention right now or miss something crucial. This manufactured urgency keeps people in a constant state of alertness, checking repeatedly to stay current. Non-posters recognize this urgency as artificial. They understand that very little truly requires immediate attention, and that important information will reach them through other channels if necessary. Perhaps most valuable is the freedom to be forgotten. In an age where every embarrassing photo, thoughtless comment, and youthful indiscretion can be resurrected at any time, the ability to leave no digital trail is increasingly precious. Non-posters move through life without creating the breadcrumb trail that others scatter behind them. Their past remains truly past, not constantly available for excavation and judgment. This collection of freedoms adds up to something profound: the freedom to be fully human, with all the complexity, contradiction, and privacy that entails. While others have traded these freedoms for the illusion of connection and the temporary pleasure of validation, non-posters have held on to something more valuable. They have preserved their autonomy in an age that systematically erodes it. For all the advantages that come with never posting on social media, there is a cost. Human beings are social creatures who evolved to exist within communities, and modern society has increasingly moved those communities online. By refusing to participate, non-posters place themselves outside the primary social arena of our time. This exclusion carries real psychological consequences that deserve honest examination. The most immediate cost is a form of social invisibility. In many social circles, particularly among younger generations, your social media presence has become synonymous with your social existence. If you do not post, you do not fully exist in the collective consciousness of your peer group. People forget about you more easily. You are excluded from inside jokes that emerge from comment threads. You miss references to things that everyone else saw online. You become a kind of ghost, present in physical spaces but absent from the parallel digital space where much of modern social life actually occurs. This invisibility can lead to a subtle but persistent sense of isolation. Even when non-posters are physically present and socially engaged, they can feel like outsiders. Conversations increasingly reference things that happened online, memes that circulated, drama that unfolded in comment sections. Without access to this shared context, non-posters find themselves left out of conversations or constantly asking for explanations. This repeated exclusion, even when minor, accumulates into a feeling of being fundamentally disconnected from your generation. There is also the suspicion that non-posters must navigate. In a culture where sharing is considered normal and healthy, those who do not share are often viewed with confusion or distrust. What are they hiding? Why are they so private? Are they antisocial? Do they think they are better than everyone else? Non-posters frequently find themselves having to explain and justify their choice, defending a position that should require no defense. This constant need to explain can be exhausting and can make them question whether their choice is worth the social friction it creates. The loss of weak social ties represents another cost. Social media excels at maintaining connections with people you do not see regularly but still care about. Former classmates, distant relatives, old colleagues, friends who moved away. These weak ties provide valuable social capital, offering access to different networks, opportunities, and perspectives. Non-posters often lose touch with these peripheral connections entirely. Without the passive updates that social media provides, relationships require active maintenance, and there simply is not enough time or energy to maintain hundreds of weak ties through direct communication. This loss can have practical consequences. Job opportunities often arise through weak tie networks. Social support in times of crisis can come from unexpected places in your extended network. Information and resources flow through these loose connections. By opting out of social media, non-posters cut themselves off from these potential benefits. They may miss opportunities that others access easily, not because they are less qualified, but simply because they are not visible to the right people at the right time. There is also a burden of explanation that falls on non-posters in their personal relationships. Close friends and family members who are active on social media may feel hurt or confused by the non-poster's absence. Why did they not like my post? Why are they not celebrating my achievement publicly? Do they not care? Non-posters must constantly reassure loved ones that their offline silence does not indicate indifference, that they care deeply, even if they do not express it through public posts. This emotional labor can strain relationships and create unnecessary conflict. the professional cost can be significant as well. Many industries now expect or require social media presence. Personal branding has become essential in fields from entertainment to entrepreneurship. Employers look at social media profiles when evaluating candidates. Networking increasingly happens through platforms like LinkedIn. By maintaining no presence, non-posters may limit their professional opportunities or appear out of touch with contemporary professional norms. They must work harder through traditional channels to achieve the visibility that others gain effortlessly online. There is a particular pain that comes from watching important life events unfold at a distance. When major news happens, births, weddings, achievements, everyone learns about it simultaneously through social media posts. Non-posters hear about these events later, through secondary channels, often finding out days or weeks after everyone else already knows and has commented. This creates a sense of being perpetually behind, always catching up to news that has already circulated through their entire social network. The fear of missing out is real for non-posters, even if they have deliberately chosen their path. They watch others build online communities, receive support during difficult times, share resources and opportunities, and they wonder what they might be missing. They see friends planning gatherings in Facebook groups or coordinating through Instagram stories, and they realize they were not even aware the event was being organized. This exclusion, even when accidental, reinforces the sense of living parallel to rather than within their social world. Some non-posters also struggle with a form of self-doubt. They watch others confidently sharing their thoughts, building audiences, influencing conversations, and they question whether their choice to remain silent is actually just fear disguised as principle. Are they protecting themselves or hiding? Is their privacy a strength or a limitation? These questions can create internal conflict, particularly when they observe others thriving through active social media engagement. The psychological price of invisibility is not paid equally by everyone. Those with strong offline social networks, fulfilling careers and secure relationships may barely notice these costs. But for others, particularly those going through transitions, living in new places, or struggling with isolation, the costs can feel overwhelming. They may wonder if their principles are worth the loneliness, if their freedom is worth the exclusion. These are not easy questions, and the answers are deeply personal. After examining the fears, intelligence, freedom, and costs associated with never posting on social media, we arrive at the question that matters most. Who is actually happier? The frequent posters who maintain connections and visibility, or the non-posters who preserve privacy and autonomy? The answer, like most meaningful answers, is complicated and deeply individual. Research on social media and happiness reveals a complex picture. Studies consistently show that passive consumption of social media, scrolling through feeds and observing others, correlates with decreased well-being, increased anxiety, and higher rates of depression. The comparison mechanism appears to be the primary culprit. Watching others display their best moments while you sit alone with your ordinary life creates a happiness gap that feels insurmountable. But active engagement tells a different story. When people post content and receive positive responses, they experience genuine increases in mood and connection. The validation is real, even if temporary. For some people, particularly those who feel isolated or marginalized in their offline lives, online communities provide essential support and belonging. The friendships formed, the understanding received, the sense of being seen and heard can be genuinely life-changing. So, where do non-posters fit in this landscape? They have avoided the comparison trap that harms passive users, but they have also foregone the potential benefits of active engagement. The question becomes whether the absence of both harm and benefit leaves them better or worse off than those who participate. One clear advantage appears in measures of anxiety. Non-posters report lower levels of social anxiety, less fear of judgment, and reduced stress around self-presentation. They are not constantly monitoring how others perceive them, or worrying about negative reactions to their posts. Their self-worth is not tied to external metrics that fluctuate unpredictably. This stability in self-concept translates to steadier overall mood and less emotional volatility. They also show advantages in measures of attention and focus. Without the constant interruption of notifications and the habit of checking platforms throughout the day, non-posters maintain better concentration and report higher satisfaction with their ability to engage deeply with work, hobbies, and relationships. This capacity for sustained attention contributes to a sense of accomplishment and progress that fragmented attention makes difficult to achieve. Non-posters also report higher satisfaction with their real-world relationships. By directing their social energy toward in-person interactions, rather than splitting it between online and offline engagement, they build deeper connections with a smaller number of people. Quality over quantity appears to be a meaningful distinction. While they may have fewer total connections than active social media users, the connections they do have tend to be more substantial and satisfying. However, this pattern does not hold universally. For non-posters who lack strong offline networks, the absence of online connection can lead to genuine isolation. Happiness research consistently shows that social connection is one of the strongest predictors of well-being. If opting out of social media means opting out of community altogether, the result is likely to be decreased happiness, regardless of the philosophical reasons for the choice. The happiness question also intersects with personality in important ways. For introverts who find social interaction draining and prefer smaller social circles, the non-posting lifestyle aligns perfectly with their natural temperament. They are not sacrificing connection, but rather optimizing for the type of connection that energizes them. For extroverts who gain energy from broad social engagement, avoiding social media might feel like wearing shoes that do not fit, constantly uncomfortable regardless of the supposed benefits. There is also a temporal dimension to consider. In the short term, the dopamine hits from social media engagement can create immediate pleasure that non-posters miss out on. But research on happiness distinguishes between hedonic pleasure, quick hits of good feeling, and eudaimonic well-being, deeper satisfaction derived from meaning and purpose. Non-posters may sacrifice some hedonic pleasure, but often report higher eudaimonic well-being. Their lives feel more aligned with their values, more authentic, more fully their own. The comparison of happiness also requires examining what we are comparing against. Are we comparing non-posters to compulsive users who check their phones hundreds of times daily? To moderate users who maintain healthy boundaries? To occasional users who dip in and out? Each comparison yields different conclusions. Non-posters are almost certainly happier than compulsive users trapped in cycles of anxiety and comparison. The comparison to moderate, intentional users is less clear. One fascinating finding from longitudinal studies is that happiness levels tend to converge over time. Initial boosts from starting to use social media fade as the novelty wears off and the negative effects accumulate. People who quit social media often experience temporary drops in mood, followed by gradual increases that eventually exceed their previous baseline. This suggests that neither choice guarantees happiness, but both involve adaptation periods and trade-offs. Perhaps the most honest answer is that happiness depends less on whether you post, and more on why you make the choices you make. Non-posters, who abstain out of authentic alignment with their values, who have strong offline connections, who use their time for meaningful pursuits, tend to report high life satisfaction. Non-posters who abstain out of fear, who remain isolated and disconnected, who use their absence as a form of superiority, tend to struggle. Similarly, people who post because it genuinely connects them to communities they value tend to benefit. Those who post compulsively out of addiction or insecurity tend to suffer. The truth about who is happier might be that it is the wrong question entirely. Happiness is not a competition between lifestyles, but a deeply personal state influenced by how well your choices align with your needs, values, and circumstances. The non-posters who are happiest are not happy because they do not post, but because their choice to abstain reflects and enables a life that feels authentic and meaningful to them. The posters who are happiest have achieved the same alignment through different means. What we can say with confidence is that the non-posters have avoided certain specific sources of unhappiness that plague heavy social media users. They do not experience the anxiety of constant performance. They do not suffer the depression that comes from chronic comparison. They do not feel the emptiness of accumulating hundreds of shallow connections while lacking deep ones. They have traded one set of challenges for another, but the challenges they face tend to be more within their control. In the end, the people who never post on social media are not uniformly happier or sadder than everyone else. They are human beings making choices that feel right to them, navigating the same fundamental needs for connection, meaning, and self-expression that all humans share. What makes them fascinating is not that they have discovered a secret to happiness, but that they have chosen a path so contrary to cultural norms. And in doing so, they reveal truths about those norms that the rest of us might benefit from examining.